All right, well, let's get started. Welcome everyone to the Women's Health Week webinar from Bicycle Network. I'm Sam Squiers. I'm going to be your host for today for our session, which is all about encouraging everyone to get back on the bikes, about being healthy, active, overcoming obstacles and barriers to living a fit and healthy lifestyle, and of course being on a bike. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a sports journalist. I was with Channel 9, the sports presenter in Brisbane in Queensland for 5 years. I've now moved back down to New South Wales, and I am passionate about women in sport. I've always been a women in sport advocate, and now I have a podcast with Podcast One Australia called On Her Game, which is about raw, open, honest conversations with elite sportswomen. So if you haven't yet looked at it, make sure you log on, subscribe, download and take a listen. I'm also the author of the children's book, Princesses Wear Sneakers, which is about sending positive messages to little girls about sport from a key early age. And it's all about sending messages and positive messages about women in sport throughout all ages, which we're going to be focusing on today. And our panel that we have today, we have Emma Jackson from Sport and Recreation Victoria there. Give us a wave, Emma. We have Tina McCarthy from Wheel Women, and she's also This Girl Can ambassador. Alison McCormack, she's Team Bicycle Network ambassador as well. Michelle Hyde, as well as a Bicycle Network ambassador, and Layla Rasadi, she's the Bicycle Network general manager of behavioural change. I cannot wait to dig in and talk to everyone on the panel. I hope everyone's had a great day. I know it's difficult times at the moment, which means webinars like this are even more important, and getting tips and insights, getting motivation, and also inspiration from everyone here. We want to hear your feedback as well. At the end of our session with the panel, we'll also open it up to questions from everyone who has joined us. At the bottom of your screen, you will see a chat icon and a Q&A icon. Now, we want everyone to go into the Q&A icon and post their questions. We will have a specific time at the end of the session where people can write their questions, but throughout the whole webinar, if you feel motivated and inspired, if you want to write your questions so you don't forget, just write them in there and we'll address them to the panel at the end of this session. We've got time allowed for that. As I said, I cannot wait to dig in and chat further and discuss some really important issues with our panel. But to welcome us all here, to give the official welcome and insights from Bicycle Network itself, I normally say throw the floor, but I'll throw the Zoom over to Craig Richards, who's the Bicycle Network CEO, to say a few words before we get started. Over to you, Craig.
Thanks so much, Sam. I just wanted to go back first to 130 years ago when society was going through what was seen as a massive change. The massive change back then was women started moving freely about their neighbourhoods. And one of the key reasons that happened was back then we changed from the penny farthing bike where you were high off the ground to pretty much the bike that we see today. One of my favourite bicycle quotes is from the inspirational women's rights reformer Susan B. Anthony, who famously said, "The bicycle did more to emancipate women than anything else in the world." Now, at that time, there were plenty of naysayers. Newspaper articles, for instance, wrote about why women shouldn't ride bicycles, and they referred to a thing that they called back then the bicycle face, which they said if you rode your bike too much, you would end up flushed, pale, and have dark circles under your eyes. So bring us back to today, when there's still a shocking imbalance with more men than women who are experiencing the joy and the freedom of riding a bike every day. So today, as part of Women's Health Week, we welcome our inspirational panelists to inspire you all through their experience and to show us just what's possible. And to all of you who are tuned in, what I'd like to say is thank you so much for joining us, and please don't ever listen to any voice that says you can't. It's most likely just as silly as those voices all that years ago who warned about bicycle face.
Thank you very much, Craig. We'll have our game faces on, not our bicycle faces at the moment, but I want to thank you very much for those words. Great way to kick us all off. Just a little bit of reminder as we get into it. Post your questions in the Q&A section. There's a chat section as well if you want to make statements, but please get on the Q&A, ask our wonderful panel some questions throughout the whole webinar. We'll be live tweeting as well with the hashtag Women's Health Week. I want to get started with our panel, and just to give everyone a bit of an insight of where you sit with active lifestyles and also with cycling as well. If everyone could just give me a little bit of an intro into what their motivation was initially to get on the bike and when that happened for them. I'll throw it over first to Alison, because I know you are so passionate about cycling. The bikes you see in the background are just a bit of your collection, and I see you on Insta all the time. You're so passionate about cycling. You're a Live ambassador as well as a Bicycle Network ambassador. But what drives your passion? How did you get involved in cycling?
Look, this is a interesting question. I kind of came late to cycling, and I lived overseas in London for 5 years and was just not healthy. And came back to Melbourne. I'm like, oh, everyone's so healthy. I can't believe it. But I'd really like to do that, but I don't know how I'm going to do that. And I think it was a wedding. I mentioned to a friend who was saying she was doing triathlon, and I was like, oh my God, I'd love to do that. And it was through a life-changing moment where my mum actually passed away suddenly that friend reached out to me, and she said, hey, have you still got a bike? And I was like, yeah, I do. And she said, great, we're going to meet on Wednesday and ride. And that was a huge thing for me. And I think that's where this ambassador thing came from. And just that feeling of giving back to cycling is about, if someone says that little word, just make sure you reach out and do that. And ever since then, I've just not gone backwards. I love the bike so much, and it's just so life-changing, literally.
How old were you? You say
Well, I'm not going to give away the age. but no, look, it was now, like I say this story a bit, but now it's getting on to 11 years. So, it was 11 years ago. I did ride before going overseas, like I won't lie. And, I was fit, but I had this moment, and but this whole bike thing stemmed from that. And since then, my life's turned around completely.
Obsession for you.
Yeah, and I've met so many people and my partner, so I'm very blessed by the bike.
Yeah. Tina, can you tell us how you got involved in cycling?
Yeah, I actually, it was kind of unintentional really, because I was purely just doing the good parent thing, going and helping my son with a school group. They wanted to do the Great Vic bike ride. So I said, yeah, look, no problem. I can do that. I've always ridden bikes. And, I was a running coach once. Of course I can do that. And it wasn't until I was actually on that first ride where I just went, my God, what has happened to me? I can't do this. They're going so fast and I couldn't keep up. And I just had this real wake up moment of realizing there as I was crying, throwing my bike on the ground on Beach Road as they all took off and my husband was left there with me. And I just realized at that moment that I had been so inactive for such a long time. And though I had been a running coach at one point, just not as a full-time job, just as a part-time thing I did, but there was a time I was doing 10K runs, and what the hell had happened to me in that process of having kids and everything, and I'd just been inactive and put on weight and became really unfit. So like Alison, I came to cycling really late. I'm happy to say the age, I was 48. So I've been doing it for about 9 years now. So
a couple of years ago.
Pardon?
Just a couple of years ago.
Yeah. So it's completely changed my life. Completely changed my life.
Did it creep up on you, your state of health after having kids, like being, running all these 10Ks and being able to fit? And you said, yeah, sure, I'll be able to do that. Did you have an inkling that your fitness was going downhill, or was it just you're like, oh, wow, I'm at that stage. I didn't think I was at that stage.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I think we look in the mirror every day and we get used to what we see. And so when it's only when you kind of see photos of yourself that you just go, oh my God. And I hadn't really paid much attention to that. And it was, I don't think it was something that crept up on me. I think it was something I knew for a long time, because having a history of heart disease in the family and knowing that my father had died at the age of 52, as I approached that age, I kept thinking, am I going to make it to 52? Am I going to be like him? I'm the youngest of 5 kids, and all the others made it, but there was just this kind of feeling inside that I just knew that something wasn't quite right. And so it wasn't a sudden wake up call. It was, in a way, it was something I deep inside I knew was the state of things.
I really want to touch on that side of it, the health of your heart condition, because it's a really important message, I think. But I'm going to come back at that and elaborate on that a little bit further. I just want to get a quick introduction from Michelle Hyde, is our next one. Michelle, you're a teacher as well for primary school. You're an assistant principal and also Team Bicycle Network ambassador. Did you get into it later, earlier? How did you get into cycling?
My story is actually a little similar to yours, Ali, and I don't think we have discussed the London days, but I also lived overseas for a number of years, and when I was there, I was cycling, but it was very much sort of practical cycling. It was to get to work. I was commuting on my bike, and moving back to Melbourne, it was a total lifestyle change. It was, living in the UK, if you're catching up with friends, you organise to meet for a pint or you meet for a glass of wine, which, is great, but probably not doing it multiple times a week. So coming back to Melbourne, I saw that there was a real community of cyclists, and I think that's sort of what prompted me to get involved, and joining a club was a real turning point. That's where I sort of started to connect with lots of other people and learned the basic skills, and it's just been amazing. And for fitness and health reasons, obviously, but for connecting with people, it's a way of life.
Were you so it was the club culture within cycling that really appealed to you? Were you still cycling before then, and were you part of team sports before then, or because I can find it, and we're going to touch on this a little later as well, it's quite intimidating sometimes if you're starting out to head to a cycling club and just say, hey, I'm here, help, I want to ride. It's really intimidating for some women.
There was definitely, I was sporty as a young child, but there was definitely a big period of inactivity in the sort of mid-20s to say mid-30s. Then it was very much about socialising, getting to the pub. And so, that, and a little bit like Tina, you don't realise how unfit you are until, you try to push yourself a little, or, I think the wake-up call for me was definitely moving back to Australia, where people just have that much more outdoorsy lifestyle. So I came to cycling as, I guess, using it more as sport, rather than just, for commuting and getting around. Would have been in my early 30s as well. And it's been the best thing I've ever done. I just wouldn't look back.
Layla, as well, you're obviously ahead of the behavioural change for Bicycle Network. I can't wait to pick your brain on behavioural changes that's happening in lockdown. But for you, your cycling story, or your active story of how you got involved in an active lifestyle, something you've always done?
No, absolutely not something I've always done. I'm quite different from a lot of others. I rode when I was in my 20s. I rode to work for a little period. I'm from the UK, and I was skint. I didn't have any money, so it was the easiest way for me to get to work. So that's what I did for a little bit. And then there was a period of time where I stopped doing that. And I lived with a group of girls that all rode bikes, a group of artists, and the house was full of them, and I hated it. And I'd be like, can you get your bikes out of the way? This is just so annoying. Anyway, fast forward a little bit. I've moved to Australia. and I find myself working at Bicycle Network, basically. And the bug, you know, gets you, and you go, yeah, right, okay, this is a good means of transport, this is a good way of getting around. But yeah, I mean, for me, just, and you know, it's funny because my friends now just laugh at me. They go, what, you spend all day advocating and championing bikes, and you non-stop talking about it, and you hate having our bikes at the house.
I love it.
So yeah, but you know, I've never played a game of competitive sport in my life. I'm not interested in sport. It's not something I was into. It's not something I was brought up to do, really. It was just not a social norm, I suppose, in my background, my history, my life. I don't class myself as a cyclist. I never use that term even, you know. I use a bike to get around. So I guess I have, yeah, a bit of a different relationship sometimes to a lot of people about the use of the bike. It kind of just sits in my world, but it has definitely grown as an aspect that I've become really passionate about, like the rest of the panelists, to go, this is just a really great way to have as part of your life. But yeah, I think, yeah, so I've kind of in my 30s kind of come back to it in terms of using it and utilizing the bicycle, but it's I don't take part in any sport side of it. I'm not part of a club. I don't own a road bike, you know, like that's not my space, really. So yes, it's a very different story, I suppose, and a very different angle on things. But yeah, that transportation method for me means that I am getting that exercise, and I suppose we can probably talk a little bit about that more.
I'm going to take that a little bit later, and it's good that I think we've got a really a wide range of I guess motivations of why people got into cycling, and also and skill sets as well, and I think that's really important because, you know, we want this to be a sport, and it is a sport for all, but yeah, you don't have to be pulling on the green and gold and sprinting and in order to participate and feel like you're part of the sport. I think that's one of the big messages. Emma Jackson is, of course, from Sport and Recreational Victoria, who've got incredible campaigns trying to get more people active, and now as well with a new Get Active Victoria campaign, which is difficult in, you know, the current climate. We're going to touch on that. But Emma, are you a cyclist? Have you always been active? Is this something that you came to late? Can you give us an idea about your background?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sam. It's great to be here and, you know, be part of this discussion. So I've always been somewhat active, and I guess that comes from many of us, you know, from our parents and our family. So my earliest, you know, memories around a bike is, you know, getting on I wasn't, you know, privileged enough to get a brand new bike, but I, you know, got onto my brother's rusted old BMX bikes, and that then me down, you know, heels going, ride the bike, and obviously crashing because, you know, you kind of need to learn how to ride a bike. So I have been, you know, active rec has been, you know, part of me for a very time, and sport as well. But I haven't actually got on the bike per se until recently. So I've got 2 young primary school aged boys. So we've gone through the amazing, you know, journey of us as parents teaching them how to ride a bike, which is, you know, as parents would hear today, it's really, you know, amazing. It's like reading, you know, teaching a child how to, or helping them to read and write. It's just one of those gifts in life that you go, yes.
It's a milestone, isn't it? It's a big occasion.
Thank you. It's like, right, you know, riding a bike, learning how to drive a car, 18th, 21st, like a key milestone in many children's and our lives. So that has been absolutely amazing. And I've obviously supported them through that. And my husband's actually an Ironman, you know, as a, you know, not a professional or anything. So, you know, since having kids here, you know, the family's very much been focused on him. But recently, 2 years ago, I got a brand new bike and absolutely love it. And I do go riding with my children, but it's somewhat stressful. You know, watch out for that driveway, keep to your left.
Yeah.
So getting out on the Mullen by myself is a total indulgence that I make happen at least twice a week. And it's free, it's fast, it's everything, you know, lives and dreams for, you know, during a day and a week. So it's a real great opportunity for me to get out by myself, not worry about who's doing what, who's saying what, who's touching whoever, and just being free, and, you know, maybe shared pathways, watching out for ducking between others. But yeah, I you know, in my week, particularly during, and I'm sure you'll touch on this, during restrictions, it's just a real blessing to be able to do that.
Well, let's go there, because obviously that was everyone's initial motivations to get into cycling, into active lifestyles. That gives us a bit of background as well on everyone. But our panelists are all in Victoria, and a lot of people are joining us from Victoria. The rest of Australia is just backing you and thinking, you know, trying to will you on, because it must be incredibly tough at the moment with the lockdown that you've had. Can you tell us, everyone, like, how has your motivation changed in lockdown? How are you coping? How has it differed your active lifestyles in lockdown to what they were before? And is there anything creative that anyone is doing in order to get more than just their hour outside of the house? I'll throw it over. We'll go back to Alison. How has your motivation changed, and how are you getting your active? Have you got any tips on how to keep active during this time?
Look, it's been a journey. I think at the start there was almost this high, like it was like this, oh, I can have, so here in Victoria we could have a friend and we could go riding, and you kind of do this dating thing almost, where you know, had all your friends, and then you'd hear through that person what everyone else is doing, and it was just like this really like, this is great, I'm going to ride through winter, it's all good, we're going to get out of lockdown. And then, to be honest, like, I really did struggle. Like, I struggled, I waned, I was like, oh, just this 5 kilometre thing came in, and then you had your zones and everyone was confused, and honestly, like, I really did suffer. the weather wasn't great all of a sudden, and just couldn't be bothered. And here I am, like, I live to get on the bike, even if it's to work, you know, it just clears the mind. So I really did struggle. But what I found is, you know, there's kind of new surfacings, you know, new things coming through. And, you know, I kind of had to say, fortunately, I live with my partner, Lee, who also rides a bike. So what can we do together? You know, we need to make sure that we're doing something together. And then there's this whole virtual world that's sparked up. I mean, the one thing I do feel is that you need things in order to enable that. And I do feel that you can't buy a wind trainer at the moment to, you know, save yourself. And if you did, it would be worth a fortune. So I do kind of feel that's quite almost not exclusive, but you kind of needed the equipment. But, you know, I'm very fortunate I've got that equipment, and there's this whole new virtual world that's sprung into place. And it's just amazing how creative people are. Like, you know, in the surface, we're Team Bicycle Network, Shell and I, and we do Peaks Challenge, and, you know, Shell's been awesome at, you know, setting up some virtual rides that are super attended just to get women in on board, you know, really inclusive. It's been fantastic. Liv are running a crit series tomorrow night, but this whole new world, you know, has popped up, just like we're talking on Zoom here, or, you know, the panelists can see each other, for everybody who's out there, and it's almost like this, you know, you can have that conversation. It's different than riding side by side, but I think that that's one thing definitely to kind of grasp hold of. And it's just amazing how people can be adaptive and create a whole new world.
What platforms are you using to connect to people in your virtual world?
Good question. I mean, there's apps, and the main one is Zwift that I've kind of been using. It's kind of very popular, you know, that this virtual world, you can ride with your friends and do races and just go for a ride if you want to, but then we'll have Zoom going as well. So, like, you kind of have this thing going on where you can see your mates and you're all on this ride, and even the apps themselves can do thumbs up, thumbs down, and there's different other ones like Full Gas, which is like this, it's probably not as interactive, but you can ride around and see the scenery, you can travel, like, you know, we're all missing that travel, and they will have kind of pre-recorded ride up, you know, somewhere to the Madonna, you know, in Italy or something, and that's like, oh, you know, please, one day. It kind of gives you hope. But there's a whole heap of different things, but that's the one thing. It's amazing how people can just create new things when they're faced with a challenge.
Michelle, if people don't have, because we've seen sports equipment just fly out of the shops, if they don't have a wind trainer, I mean, how do people get involved, or how creative can they be? What can they do to kind of still connect with people through riding and not just the one person that they're going for a ride with? Oh, Michelle, oh, mute.
Thanks, Sam. One of the things I think is really important, that's been fantastic for me, is to be a member of a few great groups on Facebook. So one of the newest ones that we've just launched is the Women's Community Bicycle Network page, and that we've already seen, you know, lots of conversation happening. I think that's a really great way for people to stay connected. It is a challenge, as Ali said, you know, at the moment. If you are wanting to do those longer rides, it's great to have the indoor trainer to do that, because as everyone knows, there's only so far you can get in an hour. That I have been really sort of trying to use that hour deadline to challenge myself a little bit with. I've gotten back into running, so that's one of the things I've been doing to try to stay a bit motivated, see how far I can get in an hour. But yeah, I would definitely recommend getting into those online groups. There's another great one called Girl Ride Melbourne. So that's what I think is great is, even though we can't connect as we usually would at the moment, people are having those conversations about what they'll do when we are allowed to sort of get out and ride again. And I think that gives us a lot of hope.
Tina, can I bring you in? You started Wheel Women. What was your motivation of starting Wheel Women, and what has Wheel Women done? I love saying that, by the way. In lockdown, how have they changed what they're doing to help women and cyclists keep active during these difficult times?
So the motivation came purely from the fact that when I started riding, I kept asking my husband heaps of questions, because he's one of those guys that's ridden to work every day, rain, hail or shine, for his whole working life. And I would ask him questions and I'd just get that kind of, oh, you know how to do it. And so I was desperate for information, and I'm one of those people that when I latch onto something, I want to know everything. And so I was constantly at the bike shop asking questions. And then, you know, I said, so, you know, can I go on a shop ride? And they all looked at me like, are you serious? And so I kind of felt really unwelcome. But when I looked around at clubs that were out there, I just felt, I don't want to do that. I'm not into racing, and I'm not into a competition, and I'm not into a kind of I suppose a club scene. And I felt really fearful and intimidated by it. And so I felt that maybe there was room to find some friends or other women to ride with. And so I remember the guy at the bike shop said to me that if I wanted other women to ride with, I would have to start something myself. So he probably didn't think I would, but I did. And the rest is kind of history. So the things that we've been doing at Wheel Women to kind of keep everyone connected is, aside from having Zoom catch-ups, we kind of challenged people to go out and do some rides where they had to draw a picture with their map on Strava. So we've had some pretty weird and wacky pictures come through. And that was pretty interesting. We also, a few of us have done burbing, which was ride every street in your neighborhood. So that's kind of challenging doing that in an hour, I must admit. Pretty much impossible depending on where you live. But it was a lot of fun doing it. For me, I found it mind-numbingly boring riding up and down every single street and laneway in our area, but there was something kind of cathartic about it as well. So they're just a few of the things we've done. You know, we don't get into the online stuff so much. I tend to use Full Gas if I do, because normally at this time of the year I would probably be headed to Japan for cycling. I normally go there probably a couple of times a year for cycling, and not being able to do that this year, I knew that on a Full Gas I could actually watch real video of being in Japan and cycling. So that's kind of fulfilled my needs to be there, and I can ride through these places I've been to and go, oh, I remember that bit. So, yeah.
You to be able to go back to that guy in the bike shop and go, so buddy, remember me? By the way, I've just founded Wheel Women. I go all over the seas, all over the world riding. This girl Can ambassador, so many ambassadors for so many different things. I'm just women's health ambassador, the whole lot. Just go, yeah, thanks for your support, buddy.
He actually, I caught up with him by chance not long ago, and yeah, he was pretty surprised. Actually, it was at the Cycling Luminaries Awards when I won the leadership award. So,
did he recognize you, or did you?
Yeah, of course he did. He's quite well known in the bike industry, and he was a little bit surprised. He always said, it's never going to work. Don't be stupid.
Oh, love it. Never say that to a woman as well.
Yeah.
So your answer would have been, watch me. Layla, let's talk about people's cycling habits in lockdown. Bike sales have spiked. Why is that? And how have people's behaviours changed? Why is everyone suddenly keen to take up bike riding? The attraction to it. I don't mean that, because we all know the attraction to it. But why now, compared to any other time, have we seen such a flood of people picking up and buying bikes and getting involved?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it, Sam? I don't think anyone really thought it was going to happen. We certainly didn't. We didn't think that was going to be the biggest craze and that everyone would go out and buy a bike. I guess the simple answer is that it's a simple pleasure, isn't it? It's a simple pleasure. It's easy to do. It's the most democratic thing ever. You don't need any special equipment, particularly. You don't need to be a certain weight, height, gender, whatever. You just can get on your bicycle and go somewhere. And I think that that's the real pleasure of it, and that's the real simplicity of it, and that's why majority of people can buy into it. I think from a behavioral perspective, again, the more people start to do something, the more it becomes normal. And we talk about social norms a lot in our world, and that's it's exactly that. You start to see people and you go, oh, okay, they're doing that. Maybe that's an activity. And you go, yeah, actually, maybe we should drag the bikes out. I think a lot of people, they use their bikes. They have them in the shed, they have them in the garage, that they take them out when they go on holidays every so often, or every once in a while with the kids maybe. But they don't really, it's not something that's built into a habit, that's for sure. And obviously there's lots of different types of activities you can do on a bike and places you can go to, as well as the recreational side of it. But I think, yeah, people have just gone, okay, I am very limited in choice. I haven't got much. But they started to see every different type of shape, size, everything out on a bicycle and realize, well, if they're doing it, I can do it. And I think that low entry point to realize that you don't have to be a certain anything, and you don't have to have certain clothes, you don't have to have anything particular, you just have yourself and the bicycle, and you don't even need a plan, you don't even need a route, we talk about planning a route when you go to work or all these other things, but you don't need that in lockdown. You're just going out to get out and get clear your head, and to just move your body. And yeah,
so limited in that sense, even if you did have a route to do that. I want to talk about barriers, but before I do, I just want to pick up on something you said, and if I can get Emma to give us a little bit more insight. Are people being more active in lockdown? For me personally, I'm not in Victoria, but I did notice in our lockdown in New South Wales, I couldn't believe the number of people I saw out exercising, and we know that I was going to buy a rowing machine and I couldn't buy one anymore. We know gym equipment just sold out. Are people being more active in lockdown, or are they just buying the equipment to plan to? And do you think that will have a lasting impact, or will we see Facebook Marketplace and Gumtree loaded with gym equipment when all of this is over?
Yeah, it's a great question, Sam. And initial research by a few Victorian-based universities has shown that the level of physical activity during restrictions, as we've gone through, to stage 3 to stage 4 in Victoria, that generally speaking, adults, so 18 plus, has increased slightly or maintained the level of physical activity. But then when we look at the children, it's decreased, unfortunately. So when you look at the whole, I call it ecosystem, and, you know, the different ways in which we moved prior to restrictions, particularly if we look at children, they might have been doing organised sport, they might be walking partway or riding partway to and from school during, you know, recess or, you know, break time at school, they're moving. So there was so many different ways that our children and us, actually, if you think about how, you know, you might get to and from work or the activities in your day, that we were moving. So it actually makes sense, particularly around our children, that physical activity, unfortunately, even with the introduction of technology and what we could be doing in and around the home, looks like it's decreased when compared to prior to restrictions. Mm-hmm. But I guess the good news for active recreation, which I work in, I'm very passionate about, and the flip side, particularly around walking and cycling, is that there has been an increase in those activities, and research is initial findings is starting to show that. Whether people have gone out and bought, you know, all the wind trainers and the brand spanking new bikes, what will happen thereafter, I guess, you know, picking up Layla's point, you know, we do have, you know, some insights around behaviour change. And I guess the longer this lasts, the more chance that people are building norms into their different norms, into their daily life. So the chances of them continuing with those norms, I guess, are enhanced. So maybe Gumtree and eBay might be flooded, but from an active rec, cycling, walking point of view, fingers crossed, hope not.
Let's talk about how we overcome barriers to getting active and to cycling. And starting with Emma, I just want to pick up on point, and maybe Layla, you can give us some behavioural insights as well. You talked about kids. Kids are not as active as what they would be. And I guess, as you said, like recess and lunch, they're not running around as much. But how can we, given the restrictions in Victoria and where we are in the rest of the country, how can you overcome that? And if you are a parent listening, how can we get our kids to be more active?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, and I don't want to say the word, but it might be the elephant in the room if I don't. Safety is something that wraps all around this. So whether it's, and I think as a mother, you know, safety for, you know, my children getting from our place to the local park to ride their bike, you know, is it a safe, you know, route? Likewise, the great work that we do with Bicycle Network around ride to school, similar things. So it's around safety. Is the parent, is the guardian, you know, happy or, you know, confident that their child is going to get to and from or part way to and from school. So I think that's a real key to this. It might be perceived safety, but, you know, again, looking, thinking back Saturday, safety, you know, we are in spring. I did get bombed by 2 magpies Saturday and Sunday, again, safety. But the Mullum, it's interesting, councillors put out a lot of, you know, slow down, ring your bell, give warning, give space to, you know, those shared pathways. So I think there's real positive value-based messaging around being kind to others. You know, the kids have been out building, you know, bike jumps during restrictions. So there's really positive ways that we can start talking around safety as a really positive, you know, way that we can, get our kids moving forward.
Yeah, and I guess just to add to that, like, I think really, you know, what we see, so I manage the Ride to School program that Emma mentioned for Victoria, and we have a program in Tasmania as well at Bicycle Network. And, you know, what we see is a lot of schools try to go, oh yeah, what is it we can do? And we're struggling with those barriers and those things to overcome. But really, what it boils down to, especially during lockdown, is just getting them out there, just getting them active, getting them up doing something. And for us, that was just coming up with a whole range of other ways to do that. So, you know, we can't get into schools right now because they're not at school. So we've had to change the way we operate, and we've kind of gone, okay, what can we do? So we've talked about, you know, getting active for 60 minutes as they need to, as, you know, young people need to, and kind of going, well, what does that look like? And trying to make it, you know, gamify it, try and make it really much more enticing and exciting and something different. We're already seeing kids, you don't need to ask a kid, do they need to get on a bicycle? They all want to do it. Encourage them to do it more during this time particularly. We've come up with an active suite, basically. Active 60, we've got Active Smiles, which is a gorgeous little campaign where we say, write a letter to somebody that you're missing that might live within your 5K radius, particularly here, and go on your bike and deliver it and drop it off. And, you know, little things like that. But again, it's that incidental exercise that they're getting to keep them going, keep them motivated. Really does help. That really kind of helps in that area.
Michelle, I'll bring you in here because you are an assistant principal at a primary school. What barriers do you see for young girls picking up cycling and our girls picking up cycling? We do know that almost it's around 40% of girls stop being active and playing sport in their teenage years. Where do you see the barriers for young girls picking up sport and cycling in particular?
It is, I do see just, you know, from looking out at the students who ride to school, that it's much more common for the boys to ride their bikes. One thing that myself and a few of the other female teachers at school try to do is just model you know, commuting to school on our bikes, and we are always involved in the Ride to School Day, and the teachers bring their bikes as well. So we're sort of trying to be good role models in that way. I think it's just a critical mass thing that girls sort of tend to do what their friends are doing, and I think that unfortunately, especially as they sort of get to be a little older in primary school, one of the barriers can be that their friends just aren't as interested in sports like cycling. So yeah, we try to do a lot of sort of positive role modelling within the school, and I talk a lot about my bike with the students. So yeah, that's how we try to combat it on a more local level.
I've done, you know, obviously through my work with women in sport and being a sports journalist, a lot of try to crack the code on this. But one of the big messages, and you alluded to it, Michelle, was to model that behaviour. And it starts with the females within your household as well. Obviously, as a mum, it's important you set the standard of what women do just as much as the father, you know, sets a benchmark of what it is to be a good man for your, you know, that's what your kids are looking at. And I always find there's young eyes are always watching. So young eyes are always watching you. What are you doing? If you wanted them to keep active, and it's, you know, it's so important, are you then keeping active? And I just think it's so important for mums to model that active behaviour, and dads as well. I knew the New South Wales Office of Sport doing a big study, big push on dads and girls and the modelling of behaviour. But I think more importantly, and I know for my two little girls, you know, I'm their best friend, they say, not daddy, but we're trying to change that. But, you know, they look to me on what is like a normal behaviour. And if what Layla and Emma are telling us about, now is the time where new norms are kind of, and new behaviours are being established through lockdown. I think it's important for us as women to remember that young eyes are always watching, and we have to model that kind of behaviour. So if we want them to be active, we have to be active. It's just extra motivation to get on our bike. I want to talk about barriers for women as well as young girls. And this is kind of young girls and women. I wonder whether with young girls, and Michelle, I'll just keep it with you for this one. Is it lycra as well? Like, is it what we have to wear as cyclists? And not that we have to wear it, but that we feel like we do. Is lycra a bit of like a setback, a bit of a barrier for young girls? I know netball changed their uniforms from years ago. So, because, you know, tight girls, they can feel really self-conscious. Does that not help?
I think you know, I can't talk to whether that impacts on primary school age girls, but I think that for women just wanting to get into the sport, that can definitely be a barrier, particularly if they've, you know, gone to the local bike shop and picked up a road bike and sort of wanting to look the part. That can definitely be a little bit of a concern, I think. Young girls, possibly. But I think, especially in primary school, kids, they're just going to wear what's comfortable most of the time. So, you know, they're not necessarily going to be on road bikes and wearing all the kit. That's probably more looking at, you know, kids wanting to get into track cycling or cycling for sport. Kids riding, no, I don't think that's a barrier for them.
Tina, can I bring you in here? What are some of the barriers for women and that you noticed through Real Women for women getting involved in cycling, and how can we overcome it? Did you notice I know when I first started cycling, I just felt so intimidated. I'm like, I don't know my way around a bike. I can't change a tire. I also find I don't know what to wear, and I feel like you have to look the part, but I don't know, look the part. Do I wear short socks, long socks, colored socks? What about my shoes? Like, they don't click in. Like, people going to think, and I don't care what people think, but now I'm seeing someone look really weird at me. Is that what you found as well? And how can we overcome that?
I definitely found that. And I'd just like to touch on a few things that Michelle said too, that, you know, this idea of wearing lycra, and we always say at Will Women, no lycra necessary. So we don't care if you turn up in a tracksuit and baggy t-shirt and that's what makes you feel comfortable, that's cool. And in fact, we even have t-shirts and everything that people can wear if they don't want to wear lycra. But as a This Girl Can ambassador, the story that I told was basically about fat chicks don't wear lycra. And my experience was, when I first started cycling, was that I wanted to look the part. I had just bought a new road bike and I felt pretty cool, and I had a lycra top, and it was a men's lycra top, and I had some shorts, kind of baggy ones. But I was out riding one day with a friend who had been a cyclist for quite some time, and I remember as we rode through somewhere in South Bank, and this guy, I heard this voice behind us as we went past say, "Oh my God, look at that. Fat chicks should never wear lycra." And, you know, to this day, it still hurts to hear that, because it was such an insulting thing to say, because he doesn't know the story. He doesn't know that I've just started this, and I've made a decision to do something about my, you know, my state of fitness. He, you know, I'm not commenting on what he's wearing, so he has no right to say that. So I think for a lot of women, it can be a very intimidating feeling when they first get into cycling about, what do I wear? And, you know, my God, I've got runners on and nobody else has got runners on. It doesn't matter what you wear, as long as you get that bike out and you ride around the block and have a great time. And I think that's one of the biggest barriers, is women just have fear. And it's not just fear about what they wear, it's fear about absolutely everything. It's fear about, you know, have I got the right colored runners on? Is my t-shirt too baggy? I don't know how to change the gears. And what happens if I have a flat tire? And oh my God, my chain's come off. What do I do? My bike's broken. So there's this whole bunch of stuff that makes women fearful about cycling. But I think also for me, and I have a very strong opinion about this, is we see so many articles in the media about the barriers to women cycling. And in a way, for me, as somebody who's come from a background in advertising, when you start repeating that story, repeat, that's how we implant those ideas in people's heads. And so when we keep implanting this idea of the barriers to women cycling through the media and through stories in the newspaper about why women are not cycling, barriers to women cycling, women start to believe that there are barriers. And the reality is that there is no barrier, you know, unless you don't have a bike, obviously, but you can go and get a bike and you can just go out there in your jeans and t-shirt and ride down the shops. So I feel very strongly about the fact that we need to start, and as a This Girl Can ambassador, we need to start saying what we can do, not what we can't do, and not what's stopping us from doing it, because there's a whole bunch of stuff we can do and we can do really well. And I've had so many women at Will Women come through who have said, I was never good at sport. Well, why weren't you good at sport? It's probably because you were told you weren't good at sport. But look at you, you're riding your bike and you're doing awesome things. Of course you're good at this. And so we need to help women believe that they can do it and they're good at it. and there is nothing stopping them.
And shift the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely shift the conversation. I'm so, the amount of times I've been asked about what are the barriers to women's cycling. If I had $1 for every time, I'd be a very wealthy woman.
Well, let's talk about what benefits you get out of it. For you personally, I'll stay with you, Tina. I love that video with this girl Ken. I just think it's just so powerful and it's so motivating and so beautiful. Well done on that great video and that great campaign. But for you with cycling, like
Sorry.
Cycling pretty much saved your life, didn't it? And that's an important message as well. Can you elaborate on how it did save your life and your heart condition?
Yeah, so 18 months ago, I was diagnosed with a heart condition. And the reason I found out was because I'd been having this persistent cough all the time, which I kind of thought was asthma related. So I checked up with the doctor, and after I was getting sick of going out and coming home coughing like crazy, and I complained to him and said, I keep getting this pain in my chest because I'm coughing so much. And of course, he then asked me about, is there any family history of heart disease? And my father died of a heart attack, and like just one massive heart attack at 52, and bang, it was all over. And so the doctor said, I think you should go and do a stress test. So within a week, he had me running on a treadmill like crazy. And when they did the stress test, it was pretty interesting because I had been riding, and I'm sorry, my phone's going off and I can't stop it now. Someone's going to have to answer that. Sorry. So anyway, I did this stress test, and they all said, oh, she's super fit. You know, she's keeping on running, and we didn't expect this to happen. But the cardiologist that was there said, I think we'll do the dye test. And that's when they put the dye in your arms and they do a big scan and watch what's happening. And it was then that they picked up, I have a 50% blockage in my left anterior descending artery. So that's the main artery that goes to the really big chambers of the heart. So big chunk of heart muscle involved there. When they told me, I was just completely gobsmacked. I was just so not expecting it. And it was a bit of a wake-up call, or a moment of realization that, my God, I'm so glad I started cycling. And they said to me there and then that, you know, thank God you're a cyclist, because if you hadn't have been so fit, you know, it could have been a really different story. Unfortunately, it's genetic. There's not much I can do about it, but their message to me, the doctor's message to me, is don't stop, just keep riding and don't ever stop. So a really important message about going and getting health checks, but also the importance of maintaining activity as we get older, and particularly for me as now a woman in my late 50s, unfortunately, you know, it's really important for me to stay active for as long as I possibly can. So yeah, interesting way to find out you have heart disease.
Yeah, but like, as you said, a good message, and also that the fact that don't wait until you have almost symptoms before you start getting healthy, because it may be too late by then.
Yeah, and also, you know, heart disease and heart attacks in women appear quite differently to men. So it's one of those things that we keep banging on about, saying if you have any, you know, little things at all, go and get them checked.
Alison, this is somewhat something you can relate to, of what cycling had given you, but you didn't really realize that it was giving you such incredible health benefits just by having a really stressful job. Can you elaborate and tell us that story?
Oh, look, I mean, yeah, cycling has given so much. Like, I just discovered this amazing community with cycling, and it almost became so social that I was becoming fitter and I didn't even realize it. Like, I loved it so much. I think the one thing about, you know, getting into the cycling and the cycling community is the health benefits, and its mental health benefits. I met my partner through cycling. So we met on the bike, which is really lovely. I mean, I've made lifelong friends, and I lost my mother, as you know, and my friend reached out to me, and I set a goal to do Peaks Challenge, and it was the first one I did, and I I couldn't have imagined doing this cycling ride, but what was the best part of it was the actual journey upon the way, and meeting people and learning about people, and everyone's always got a reason to be on the bike. And I love asking people, why do you ride? What made you get on the bike? You know, what gave you that, if it's commuting or anything. But everybody's story is like it's a positive experience. And for me, it's about how, you know, you can make that an experience for somebody else. So, you know, always if you're at a party, you know, people will say, oh, you ride, you know, how did you get into riding? And often you kind of sense, well, that they want to ask a bit more about that. And Tina, I love what you do in getting people on the bike. And I think, you know, if people will always say, I wish I did that. And if they do say that, just clock it. And then, you know, do what my friend did and reach out, or say, you know, go and see Tina, or do this, you know, because it can be life-changing. And I think, you know, that's my journey. And I just love seeing increase in participation. I agree with this, the barrier thing and how you get people. I think it's having a positive, just say, hey, you've got a bike, take the time, take that hour, you know, and go and see that person and say, let's go for a ride. Or if someone says, I'm scared about turning on a bike, take that, you know, hour and teach them and show them. And that little effort goes such a long way, and it just rebounds, and then you've got all these amazing avenues. So I mean, for me, cycling was completely life-changing. I'm loving seeing the progression. There are so many more women on the bike than there were 10 years ago. When, you know, when I did that ride, I was one of a handful, and now we're up to 11%. It's a really challenging ride. It's 235 Ks. You know, it is quite, I think, you know, Emma, you made the point that, you know, it was a bit about your husband because you're a bit time poor. Like, it's difficult to do that. But to see that increase to 11%, we're getting there. There's so many positives. And so we need to keep that positive message, just to, it's doable, you know, and for young people, it just is, you know, you can do it. It's not a question.
I just want to have a look. We've got a couple of questions in the Q&A. Declan has asked a question, and we touched on this as well, but I'll just get a few tips from it. The physical activity, as we mentioned, drops significantly when students get into high school, especially amongst teen girls. What's your perception of exercise and physical activity? How has your perception of exercise and physical activity changed over the years? But the thing I really want, do you have any advice for teen girls? We talked about the advice for parents and mums, but what would be your advice for teen girls? Is there anyone in particular want to put up their hand if would like to answer that question? Layla?
Yeah, just quickly, a quick note on it. You know, we run a bicycle network. We run a program called Mind Body Pedal, which goes into high schools and specifically works with teenage girls to look at that and look at those barriers. And I guess you know, the stuff we look around isn't just get on a bike, you can do it. I mean, like Alison says, they can, of course. We need to keep pushing that positive message, but it's really about exploring what those barriers are, making them feel comfortable, building their self-confidence, making sure they feel they've got that space, keeping that space sacred to them, and women only is really important in that space and in the project. And I think kind of just making sure that we really listen to what they're looking to do, listen to their barriers and their conversations and what their fears are around that, and really just, you know, work through those with them. So that program really works to kind of overcome some of those barriers and eventually get them riding on a bike and riding to school, you know. But it's a very slow process, and we don't expect them to be riding to school as the first thing by any means. So we go through a process of things and get them involved, think about their mind, think about their body, and obviously then the pedal. But, you know, like really kind of making a holistic approach to what they do. And I guess my advice is to really just think about your world and what you really want out of it, and how you really, you know, you need to focus on your own self, and no one's going to give you more time than you do yourself, and you need to kind of focus that energy on your own time and prioritize yourself. So that would be my thing. But I'll pass over to Tina.
Yeah, Tina? Advice?
Yeah, I think we've had a bit of experience in running some programs for teenage girls, and I think, and also my experience of being with my son's school as a parent helper on Great Vic bike rides and riding with the teenage girls in that. And I think it's really important to give the teenage girls some ownership over what takes place, because we're really great as parents and adults of saying, okay, here's program, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, and all these steps that we set up. But I think for teenage girls, unless you get them involved in what they want to do themselves, it very often falls on very deaf ears very quickly. And if you can get them to start setting the agenda about what this is that they're going to do, all of a sudden it becomes fun and interesting and engaging. Might be really boring for the adults who are doing it with them, but the girls have a great time. And so I think we need to give them a bit of self-direction, I suppose. Yeah.
I think sometimes I always find we look at sport through a male lens without, and just expect to apply that to females. And I think that's, you know, I've worked with many of Australia's national sporting organisations, and so many of them do it. They're like, well, this worked for the men, and there's a lot of men at the top. So they just look at that lens and think it applies. I'm like, we are completely different creatures. We're from different planets sometimes. We need to look at this with fresh eyes through a female lens. And a lot of that time is getting females involved in, I think, in leadership positions in sporting organisations, but it filters down so that even in, you know, cycling clubs and community sporting clubs, getting more women involved in those kind of leadership positions. And like you said, involving young girls, and make sure that, you know, because sometimes we don't know what teenage girls want. They're as complicated as teenage boys. They're all complicated teens, but let them give us their lens to look through, I think is really, really important. But would you agree, Emma, like in terms of what I'm saying about even down to community level of having that male lens and trying to, you know, get more females involved in leadership positions in community sporting clubs so that we have the female lens, which can help a lot of females in our sport?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that's a really important part of the puzzle, and something that Sport and Recreation Victoria has, you know, tried to work with, and is, I should say, working with a whole range of stakeholders, including sport clubs, to ensure that there is representation from females, both at board or committee level, right throughout. So whether it's someone, you know, participating or helping out, there is a real, I guess, representation of what makes up our community. And it does go beyond, you know, female, male. It is, you know, we are working for diversity across, you know, a whole range of other, you know, cohorts, I guess, within our community. But it's really about getting that representation. But a really important part of that, that we as an organisation has been working at, is to get, I guess, at one of the first steps in the right direction, representation, particularly at those peak body level, around, females, I guess, on boards. And we've got board quotas that we're, you know, working towards with our organisations. So, and I guess, picking my first point, it's just one part of the puzzle. There's so much more that we can be doing, all of us, to be able to, give girls and others in our community, you know, I guess, a crack at whatever they want to, and whatever their heart desires to do.
Alison, did you have something? Did I see you put your hand up?
No, but I can wholeheartedly agree. I was seeing an interesting question about e-bikes, and I think that's a fascinating thing. I think they're great. Like I really think anything like getting people on the bike is a wonderful thing. There is a note too about expensive. I did mention I was older and I haven't got my glasses on, so I'm having trouble reading it. But in terms of that, I mean, money can be a barrier as well. And I think, you know, again, this kind of comes down to community and sharing. Obviously an e-bike isn't expensive, but I guess what I would love to see is some tax incentives around cycling, as they do in other countries. And I think that's certainly something for all of us to advocate for, to get anyone on a bike. But I think, again, you know, obviously community spirit, and it doesn't matter what you ride, but you know, you just need to try and get on a bike. But I'm definitely an e-bike.
You can you can have it to help you a lot, or you can pick how much force it gives you. I know that's not the right tech term, but how much force it gives you, so you can get a big workout if you want, and maybe, like, if you're riding to work, you don't want to get sweaty on your way to work, but you're happy getting sweaty on your way home. So an e-bike on the way to work might help you out and not turning up to work sweaty and disgusting. And then you can have your massive workout at home, and every little bit helps. Would you guys agree?
Absolutely. I completely agree. And sorry, Tina, I know you'll put your hand up, but I know some wonderful stories where just even getting up a hill it can be quite hard. And I know someone who is in the Dandenongs, which is a hilly part of Melbourne, and they got their parent an e-bike, and it's been life-changing. That parent lost 15 kilos just by being able to get out on the bike and to use the e-bike. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I ride an e-bike, so I think I'm like the opposite to the normal demographic that people do think, that is like more elderly. And I think for me it is a good entry point to be, and like, you know, I don't think you're not throwing shade at that, Ali, obviously, but I'm just saying that it is something about an entry point to people. And I think that any kind of physical activity we can encourage, if it's, you know, a pedal to work or it is pedal to the shops or whatever, and it's on an e-bike, it's better than sitting in the car, it's better than sitting on the tram. You're moving, you're getting your body active, and for people who aren't wanting to be, you know, elite, to be racing, to be, you know, like on a road bike, you know, then it is a really good opportunity to get people introduced and encouraged into something, to kind of just spur that interest and that confidence that you can do, like you were saying, you know, you can do something, you can be part of that and have some physical activity in your life. And that's how I see it. For me, it's a real bonus. And I also use it not just for hills, but to know that I can get anywhere at any distance, and there's no barriers to that. I don't have to go, oh, am I going to be able to make it there? Like, the e-bike helps with that. So yeah, I'd just say,
Emma, how do we overcome the barrier of the cost of e-bikes? Because they are, you know, they are so expensive. Can the government have an incentive where you can hire a bike, you know, a bit of like a pay later scheme where you can like hire a bike, and when you've paid enough of the cost of the bike, then it's yours. That'd be great. Just an idea.
Yeah. I think there's great examples, you know, as people, the panelists have said, overseas, that we can definitely learn from. You know, it can be expensive to buy a bike, but also there's great options to, you know, picking up your point about eBay and Gumtree and looking at, you know, recycle options. There's also the like really great bikes that are secondhand that you can pick up at reasonable prices. So I think it's about looking at options and seeing what's available. It certainly shouldn't, and we wouldn't want it to be, you know, a barrier to giving it a crack and getting out there on the bike. There's definitely options out there.
I think one of the things that I keep hearing, because I'm riding an e-bike pretty much exclusively now, as a specialized brand ambassador. I was lucky enough to be given one of their e-bikes to ride this year. And I think for me, when I was told by the doctors that you have to stop doing the interval training and you can't do those big hills anymore, I felt like a window slammed shut when they told me that, and it was really quite devastating, and I knew that my riding was going to change forever from that day. But when the e-bike possibility, and a beautiful road e-bike, and yes, they are very expensive, but all of a sudden that window opened again, and I felt as though I could do all of the things that I really wanted to do again. So the other side effect of having an e-bike is that it's just so much damn fun. I can't get off that bike, and I ride more and I ride further than I was before. So, and some days I think, like even today, actually, I had to go and pick something up from down the street. And as you said, Sam, you can adjust the power on them, and it was about to rain. So I put it on turbo and away I went. I was home in a flash before the rain.
Well, I actually did the Tour de France in 2016 and 2012, but and we rode bikes the whole way. In 2016, we went to one of the spots in the Pyrenees, and there were no bikes left in the whole town. So only e-bikes. My husband thought it was cheating. I thought it was amazing. It was when they were first coming out. And you know what? The looks on people's faces as we're going up the Pyrenees, and I'm hardly ever cracking a sweat, just kind of pushing up, and they didn't know it was an e-bike. And it was, that was pure satisfaction, I can tell you, doing the Tour de France on an e-bike.
I reckon you rode past me. I remember going up a mountain over there, and these people just flew past, like we were standing, so I was like, and it was when they first came out, I was like, what's going on there?
Yeah.
Those people are amazing.
Yeah, the looks, we've got videos, the looks on people's faces. I love the groups of men just going, what? Like, yeah. And I wasn't in my lycra at all. It was
absolutely awesome.
I've gone over time and I have a habit of doing that, but I just want to pose one question out there. And it's not about, I just want tips from the mums out there, because I know personally, as one of the questions I want to bring up, when you have kids and throw kids into the mix, geez, it's hard to get time to ride a bike, you know, normally with full-time work, but throw kids in the mix, and kids that can't be on the bike when they're small. How can you overcome, how can we juggle that? Is there, I know, Emma, you said you've got kids, Layla as well. How can we do that? What's your tip? Does anyone have any tips? Throw them to us. I need them.
I guess, I mean, that, do you know what, I'm not really sure I do have tips, because it's a big challenge for me at the minute. Like I say, I've got a 17-month-old and I have an e-bike. Like I say, I have a couple of bikes, but I have an e-bike that I use most of the time. And we bought a really swanky Swish baby seat for the back of it. And I actually really hate riding with it, because I actually find it really, the balance really funny, and I get really scared and nervous about it. So I'm already like, okay, there's some barriers. What am I going to do about that? And you know, to take the little one to nursery when we're allowed to, you know, was something I was hoping to do on the bike, and I've really shied away from it because I just don't feel comfortable. And I think for me that is a massive challenge, and I think there probably are lots of other women like me thinking that you know, you're seeing people all the time do these things, and actually it might not be. And actually maybe it's the e-bike, because the power assist actually is a bit jerky and could be part of the issue with that. But I think the thing is to just keep trying, to keep having a go. Try it when you aren't pressured, when you know you haven't got other things going on. Try it on the weekends or whatever. Do it with somebody else, and with a partner or somebody. Maybe try other options. I'm looking into, just before lockdown, getting a trailer instead, or different versions of it, to just try and make that switch. To keep in mind the physical activity is really key. If I could keep that up, that would be really brilliant. But yeah, what other means could I try instead of the one thing that I see everybody on and go, well, that must be the thing we do, so we bought it, and now go, oh, it doesn't quite work for us at the minute. So yeah, that's.
I think particularly with young kids, to be kind on yourself. There's so much going on anyway with, really young kids. Every bit counts. So, whether your child is learning on a balance bike, it's okay to go a block. That's amazing. They're moving, they're getting out there, they're exploring the world with you. So being kind to yourself and what's possible. And I guess to reassure people, I've got a grade 1er and a grade 3er. At this point in time, they've gone through many sizes of bikes. It is insane. I think my grade 3 is up to he actually took my bike out on the weekend. So size number 4 bike. So that's a journey. They'll get there. There will be times where you can go further, all of you together, but it's also important, like I've said, I think at the start, to also be kind to yourself and take that time out. If you want to use that to go on a bike, that's okay. We can be, put ourselves first sometimes, as well as our family. So
I know my husband and I try to tag team, so we will do, like, I'll get an hour, he'll get an hour, and that's just, and the days of the long 3-hour rides are kind of over, but they won't be over forever. People keep telling us they won't be over forever. This is just a moment in time. But right now I'll go for a ride, he'll look after the girls, and then he'll go for his ride afterwards. We do that with running. I'll run to the park while he takes them to the park, and then I'll take over and he'll run home, and then I'll drive the girls home. And my other tip would be to accept help and ask for help. And I don't always do that. We feel guilty as women to ask for help. And ask family, if you could just, anyone that you've got around, even if someone else that just had a baby that is active as well, you could do that same tag teaming with them and their kids. Sometimes we just don't, and I know I do, I just don't ask or accept help when it's offered. Tina, do you have any insights as well from your women about this issue?
A lot of the women that ride with us, their kids are a little bit older, but I know that there are certainly some in that position. I think, in fact, I was just talking about this today on one of the Women's Health Week sessions I was doing, that it's a little bit about self-care, and we really need to take the time in the day to have that self-care moment. And I agree with you, having you know, my child is now 22, so it's a long time ago for me, but I think taking or accepting help is a really big thing. And I know women are terrible at doing it usually, but yeah, accept the help and take that moment to have a little bit of self-care and do something, put yourself at number one for a change, because if you're not going to do it, you just don't function effectively. So I think you really need to just be kind to yourself and take that moment.
On that, I think that's an awesome message, which we can, not just mums, but all women, we can take that on board. And that's a great message to finish up on. And that's all our questions answered as well. I just want to thank our panel, an incredible discussion and conversation today. Thank you so much for taking part. I hope lockdown can end soon. We all hope so, but you've given us a lot of tips on how we can still stay active and look after our self-care and our mental health, which is a big important message in Women's Health Week as well. This week is also Are You OK Day. I'd encourage everyone, if they're out there, if they know someone within Melbourne who might be struggling, or even if you don't know if they're struggling, to call each other, to ask that question. And if you're not okay, feel comfortable enough to be able to say that. That's a message that's come out of Are You OK Day, and also Women's Health Week. Prioritise that time. First, for Bicycle Network, as well as the webinar, we have the virtual bike ride, which is going on. There's prizes to be won. We're trying to encourage women to get on their bikes and be as physically active this week. At least try like a 30-minute sessions this week, and you can log those with Bicycle Network and go in the running to win some great prizes as well. There's a photo competition as well, so if you can put your cycles, be creative in how you do your photographs, and use the hashtags Bicycle Network and Women's Health Week, and tag Bicycle Network in those photos to go in the running to win some prizes as well. I've really enjoyed the discussion today. I'm going to have a little bit of a plug for our participants who are online now. If you can go on Apple, Spotify, Podcast One, Australia app, look up On Her Game with Sam Squiers, be really motivated and inspired by some great elite sportswomen, the conversations that these sportswomen and the issues that they've dealt with, have delved really, really deep into them in these really raw, honest and open conversations. They've blown me away every single time. And I think as well during this time, and you know, Women's Health Week and also Are You OK Day, it's a good time to show that, you know, no one is immune to some really deep issues that are going on. And these elite sportswomen have been really open in talking about them. And they're some really funny conversations as well. They're really inspiring. Or go on to princesseswearsneakers.com to buy your Princesses Wear Sneakers book. They're my little plugs. Thank you very much. But thank you, everyone. Stay healthy this week. And I really look forward and stay connected to Bicycle Network. Everyone on the panel, we can find you on Instagram. We're all Insta lovers. That'd be great. And yeah, thank you very much for joining us for the Bicycle Network Women's Health Week webinar tonight.
See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.